Welcome to another World of UX podcast. This is your host, Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. A special welcome, as always, to those of you joining us for the very first time. Today, we're going to continue with the Talk Circuit series, another one of the talks that I've delivered over the years. This week, we're going to go back to 2022, and we're going to share a talk that I delivered at University of Michigan on World Information Architecture Day. So this is from 3 years ago, roughly, but some people need to hear a little bit more about information architecture. Some people never heard me talk at length about information architecture, unless maybe you heard the 4 pillars of UX talk, but this talk focuses only on information architecture. So go ahead, sit back, enjoy. Those of you that are watching by way of video, you get to see all of the different artifacts, different visuals that are there. Those listening by way of regular podcasts, hey, take some time. Go off to YouTube, check out the video when you get a chance. But let's not delay any further. Let's go ahead and dive in. Enjoy Long Live IA from World IA Day in 2020.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Thanks to those of you in charge, the Brain Trust of World IA Day, for having me. Always excited. I usually speak at Kent State. I'm never at home on the. I usually leave. Well, this is a new for me and a first for me to be at home. Years ago, I used to come up to U of M, but for several years in a row, I was at Kent State, so it was nice for me to be at home this time. So thank you for the opportunity. Glad to hear the great talks already thus far, and I was just going back and forth with the first speaker, just some phenomenal things that I want to share on my podcast. But at any rate, I'm going to stop gushing, and I'll get into it here. So as you know, the introduction is done. I actually even took one of my intro slides out because no sense you hearing more about me right now. But what I will do is just share a little bit about my professional footprint. I do like sharing this. I have been around for some years now, full-time in UX since 2005, doing it for 10 years. Prior to that, in spurts and with a freelance web design business and part-time on different jobs, things of that nature. But I absolutely love the discipline and doing any and everything I can do to support it. Currently serving as a UX research manager at Sherwin-Williams. They just okayed remote workers, so I will be looking for researchers in the not too distant future. Hintity hint, just so you know. But at any rate, my teaching is about to expand a little bit. I'm currently teaching at Kent State. I teach at Lawrence Tech, Harrisburg University in Pennsylvania, in talks to join the staff at UCLA. And later this year, I'll start teaching at Michigan State University in the Masters of CX program over there. So I just wanted to share that for those who might be interested. But diving into the topic, a lot of these things that you're going to hear, there may be some things that you already know. I'm hoping that I can stir up some additional thought with regard to the concept of UA or IA. I hope I can stir up some additional thoughts on that and just to help renew people's love for this aspect of UX and to understand the importance of it. There'll probably be a couple eye-opening moments in here and a couple of little provocative things, but that's okay. We just try to stir up as much critical thinking as we can. That's our major goal. So what is IA basically? And I've got 3 definitions, one from Warman, one from Morville, Rosenfeld, and Arango, and one from usability.gov. And I'll read these. Normally don't. In this particular case, I think it's important that I do. So first, it's about the creation of systemic, structural, and orderly principles to make something work. I love Richard Saul Wurman and the way that he words things and the way that he makes us think. Really, really critical. The thoughtful making of either artifact or idea or policy that informs because it is clear. Just phenomenal. Just love the way he puts things. Number 2 from Morville, Rosenfeld, and Arango, they state that it's a design discipline that is focused on making information findable and understandable. These things are key. And then number 3 from usability.gov, Information architecture focuses on organizing, structuring, and labeling content in an effective and sustainable way. The goal is to help users find information and complete tasks. Now, these things might all come across as very obvious, but as you're going to see throughout this talk, and part of the reason that the talk is titled the way it is, Long Live Information Architecture, is that as important as it sounds in hearing these definitions, it actually has taken a back seat in the discipline today, and that's part of what I want to call out. So when we think about the benefits of IA, because of course you got your definitions, now what's in it for us? What's the wisdom factor here? It creates systemic, structural, and orderly principles to help things to work. It makes information findable and understandable, just extracting from the definitions. Organizes, structures, and labels content in an effective and sustainable way so that people can find information, complete tasks, and make decisions. So to add a little bit more on there. So this is the benefit. Now, the funny thing is, and I'm sort of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I'm going to say this here, as I think it's important to help give a little bit more context to what I'm about to present, is that over the years, even though these are the benefits of IA, at one time, the vast majority of us who've been in the discipline for longer than just the last 3 or 4 years, we were either information architects or we were interaction designers. The vast majority of us were information architects, and information architecture was at the core of what we were learning, and it was at the core of what we did. In the last few years, not so much. Not so much. I'll point that out as we go through this. I thought it'd be important, and I'm so glad I found an English version of this, because I had a Spanish version of it before, and it was really painful to go through it. But glad to have the English here. Just a little bit of history, and I'm going to do a couple of historical things here. You wouldn't think of it, but information architecture was first discussed going all the way back to 1970. All the way back to 1970 at an event with Xerox and the Park Scientific Group. Okay, it came up. 6 years later, Richard Saul Wurman presents it during a lecture. In 1976, he talks about it. Okay, so it's out there. Does it have a lot of traction? No, not really. Not really. You have to come all the way to the huge milestone to me, which is Richard Saul Wurman wrote a book in 1996. There were a couple other books that were presented. Don't necessarily have the same visibility as his, but when Rosenfeld and Morville wrote their first edition of the Polar Bear book in 1998, which is now we have the advent of digital, the internet is a thing, and everybody's rushing to the internet. And I'm sure a lot of you remember maybe not, the dot-com bust. I like to think that it was the dedication to and the embracing of information architecture to help us overcome that, because everybody rushed to the internet, but people couldn't find anything. They couldn't complete tasks. Back to those definitions again. And so, again, you have the book that Rosenfeld and Morville wrote, the Polar Bear book. Jacob Nielsen wrote a book around that time. Kahn and Lenk wrote a book about that time. And now we're actually having a job. Most of us fell into what we now know as UX, ironically, which I think is absolutely hilarious. You can hear 10 or 15, 20, 30, 50 testimonies of early practitioners, and the vast majority of us, over 90% of us, fell into it. And so things start to become apparent. They start to become important. They start to become recognizable. People start to get information architecture on their radar, and it starts to have some importance. Early schools of thought, again, Richard Saul Wurman. In short, he talked about it as a design of information, what actually informs people. Rosenfeld and Morfeld sort of kicked off the high, I want to call it the popularity amongst those of us who were in these circles. They really kicked it off for a lot of people, and that book is still referred to today. They still use that as the textbook for the information architecture course at Kent State University. So you've got schools of thought ranging from 76 to 98. all foundational when you really think about it. Some more recognizable, more popular than others, but that's our foundation. So I want to give you my take on history and why what I'm going to talk about today how, really help you to understand different aspects of how critical they are. Now, I talk about this little what I call a history lesson, very high level, but I'm only going to point out certain aspects of this. Now, Don Norman is here because he was the first person that we know of who had the phrase user experience in his job title when he was doing UX work for Apple. It didn't become popular for another decade or so after that, actually more than a decade, more like 12 years after that, when it started to become commonplace very slowly. But he's the one that sort of kicked it off. We like to think of it that way. So I keep that in here. Initially, the most of the things we now know as UX work, and I'm just going to say UX, except for why I need to specify IA going forward, just for brevity's sake. A lot of the initial work was done, the vast majority of it was done in creative agencies or by creative agencies for corporations. The corporations were being sold on it, but they didn't know, and they weren't really buying in, and they just trusted the agencies, hence the logos at the bottom with Digitas and GS&P and different companies like that. Now, once that, some of you are, I'm sure, are familiar with the research that was done. IBM did some research and NASA did some research about the importance of user-centered design and the impact it has from an ROI perspective. And there were two different sets of results, and other people have done studies after that, but it was those first initial studies that came up that were really huge, because combining the two, for every dollar you invest in UX, you get anywhere from $100 to $250 in return. Well, that's why I have the logos at the top, the corporations, because that's when they decided the light bulbs went on. All they heard was profit. And so they get involved and they start to invest more with the creative agencies. And some of them started to establish UX teams in-house. They're going after that ROI that they heard about. Now, did they learn about UX? No, they just decorated their halls, as some of us like to say, with UX people, but it still opened the door. And so this little illustration at the bottom is just reflective of a lot of the interviewing and a lot of this massive drive and of open positions available across the employment landscape. But that's also why I have that little toxicity, that little nuclear icon there, because this is where the problem comes in. Now, IA used to dominate in UX spaces. When you have the issue where you have more open positions than qualified people to fill them, that's when the issues started to happen. And so I'm going to go beyond this now, because we don't need to look at that anymore. And I want to illustrate it this way. So again, interaction design was, you see books about interaction design before you see books about information architecture that were written. So back in 96, not a lot of emphasis on IA, a little bit in the books, but not much. And it certainly wasn't called IA. The big milestone for us is 1998, as mentioned, when a few books come out, the focus is on IA. I actually like to think that because of Amazon's initial commitment to IA and to user experience, that's one of the reasons why they're so dominant. Today, the focus on what we now know is UX, on CX, things of that nature, they're dominant. And they made sure that they nailed those things and invested properly, and now the ROI speaks for itself. But that was the heyday of IA starting in 98. Now, over time, 2005 to 2007, you start to see the rise of the unicorn. The corporations want to bring UX people in-house, but they don't want to bring in people with all these little specializations. They don't want to have a person that's doing code and a person that's over here doing this and a person that's over there doing that. And so you start to see the rise of the unicorn in about 2005 to 2007. Are they still looking for them today? Yeah. But that's when the drive really started. And to a great extent, a lot of us we were We were information architects. That grew to being UX designers and UX architects. And we did everything. The UX architect and the UX designer, we did research, we did information architecture, we did interaction design, we did everything. So pretty interesting how all that started to pan out. Fast forward to 2013, and notice, if you will, IA is getting smaller. Illustrate. Then you have the rise of design thinking. And the rise of, which I'm not going to get into in detail, we're just going to focus on IA today. Some of you know how I am, and I'm going to leave my soapbox over here and stick focus here. Design thinking starts to rise, less focus on IA. In 2019 to 2022, we see the common phrase, everybody's a UXer, everybody's a designer, and focus on IA reduces even more. So I think I'm hoping you're starting to see the dilemma at hand here is that IA had its heyday, and then over time, it just continues, the focus continues to reduce. And that is an issue that is still bogging us down a bit today. There's an educational side that I would like everybody to consider. Now, back in the mid-90s, again, we fell into UX, many of us. You surely didn't find a program that would allow you to study a lot of the things that we now know today as UX. But in 2000, degree programs did start to be established at different universities. I'm really happy about that. That's a good thing. We need formal education around anything that needs to be a point of expertise, no matter what the discipline is. In 2011, and remember what was going on before, now I'll sort of bring a lot of this together in a moment, the boot camps get established. In particular, there were already developer boot camps, but UX boot camps came on the scene in about 2011. These are for-profit learning centers. I remember one when I went to the Wayback Machine just to study their marketing. I noticed that you see them start to advertise UX courses in 2011, but they were focusing on lean UX. There was no focus on, not only then in 2011, but even today, there is no focus in the boot camps on UX. And I've got a quote from a person that you may find interesting here in a moment, that it's one person's quote, but I've talked to countless individuals who all had the same testimony. The MOOCs came along, massive open online courses, your edX, your Udemy, Coursera, places like that. People could learn about UX, but there is not a consistent presentation of or emphasis on information architecture. So that, again, it parallels how you see the reduced focus on the discipline. 2018, micro degrees becoming more common. And again, you can learn about UX, but you don't see the emphasis on IA that's reflective of what we need in today's design culture. Now, just to help illustrate what's going on from a bootcamp perspective today, and this is a direct quote that came from someone, and again, I talked to many people who feel the same exact way. They felt that their experience was exactly the same as this individual, but they said that regarding information architecture, some material on the subject was presented, but there was very little explanation or theory, and no practice was offered. So IA is being presented in many educational experiences as an aside. When you consider the fact that IA is at the core of what we do and who we are, this absence of emphasis on UX is eventually, or did eventually, become directly connected with the lack of emphasis on UX in the or IA in the user experiences. And when you consider the benefits of IA, isn't that a problem? Now look at this. This is where I look to combine these things. And these are estimates. 1995, little to no, there's got to be some, we would assume some focus on what we know as information architecture. We just started calling certain things after a certain time as well. So we want to keep that in mind. I estimate 3%, 60% in 98, 90% in 2003. That's the peak. But it has continued to decrease. So today in 2022, we're talking about approximately 15%. It is, I've worked a lot of places. I talk to people all over the world. I speak all over the world. I have my podcast. I talk to my guests. I talk to people. I mentor people. And the topic of IA frequently comes up because I'm asking about it. And I inquire with a lot of people, and they either don't know, don't think about it, or there's no emphasis. And so that leads to where we are today. Like, what is going on? IA, again, is at the core of who we are. When you think about the major, what I like to constantly refer to as the major product, what does IA produce? It produces findability. That is the main thing, the main product that comes out of information architecture. And if that's the case, isn't that at the core of every single solitary user experience? I'm reminded of, and I don't have a slide in here to address this, but I think it's good to mention it here. Many of you are familiar with vitamin T. Vitamin T did some research in, I believe it was about 2017, 2018, that the results were shared. And they said that 97% of websites, the experiences were actually non-optimal. I paraphrase. 97%. That's the part that stands out to me. 97% of experiences are non-optimal, but it's because of that same degraded experience that I alluded to, and the fact that IA is not being taught, it's not being learned, there's no focus on it. There have been some books that have been published lately on information architecture, but not very many. I have a book list up on Medium. I share it regularly, and people get excited when they find out about it, and it's like their first foray into information architecture. And that's why I constantly share the information I'm sharing with you today, because we have to turn back to information architecture. The long-lived information architecture is not just a cute phrase, or it's not a cute phrase at all. We need to make sure that we're putting the proper emphasis on it. We need to make sure that we're sharpening our saw concerning it. If we're educators, we need to make sure that we're stressing the importance of information architecture, because again, its product is findability, and it's directly connected to the finding of information and the completion of tasks. And that's what everybody is doing. That's at the core of every mental model that we look at. And so we should not be leaving information architecture aside. I want to point out 10 key IA factors, and we're going to shift over to our tapping into the theme for this year's World IA Day. 10 key IA factors I want to just call out. There's some here that are, I mean, it's not limited to 10 is what I'm trying to say here now. There are more than 10 key factors. These are just 10 that I choose to highlight today, but some of these are definitely key and the most important, such as nomenclature. What is nomenclature? It's the way things are labeled. How are you labeling things in your navigation? How are your calls to action structured? And a lot of this work today is being passed on to what folks are calling UX writers, but we did all of these things years ago as information architects. So nomenclature is key. Taxonomies. How are you grouping things? Nomenclature plus taxonomy equals what's referred to as an information set. I read part of a book years ago called Information Foraging Theory, where the author stated that people hunt for information in a way that is highly reflective and reminiscent of the way that animals hunt for food. Hence the name of the book, Information Foraging Theory. So when people are looking for information, when they're trying to find info, when they're trying to complete tasks, we are looking for a scent, the same way that a bear or a fox or whatever the animal is trying to find food. And so the nomenclature plus the taxonomy, you know when you nailed it, because then people get the proper information sent, and then they can find what it is that they're looking for. This information, the nomenclature, and the taxonomies usually make up number 4. The navigation, that's usually where you find it. There's some other elements, and I'll talk about those in a moment. And so all of these come together as part of key aspects of information architecture. Number 5 is findability. This, again, is the major product. This is what a strong information architecture, or what any information architecture should produce. Even a bad one will produce it or produce a non-findability. If people can't find what they're looking for, you have an IA problem. So findability is key, facilitating the ease by which info and tasks are found and completed within an experience. Search. Some people don't think that search is a part of information architecture, but it is. The search appliance that's used is key. Every search experience has an appliance. How are you actually supporting the search experience? How are you searching how results are displayed? If you have suggestive search as part of it, what's the database that's tied into that suggestive search? I remember doing a search years ago on a website, and I love typos because we get a lot of free entertainment out of typos. And one day I was trying to type something, and I typed Sly, SLY, on the Delta Faucet site. They fixed this. This is years ago. I typed in SLY, and when I typed in SLY, the suggestive search said Sylvester Stallone. I'm thinking, why is that suggestion? And so, of course, curiosity is at the core of what we do as well. So, of course, I clicked on it. I click on it thinking that apparently, are you mean to tell me there's a Sylvester Stallone Delta Faucet special edition? So I click on it, and then it says the results. It brought back the null results. Why did you suggest something that's not here? Why did you suggest something that's not relevant? Again, it has to do with findability. If anything that's associated with findability is a part of information architecture. So for those that may not have been aware, search is a part of that. I like to separate number 7 from number 6 because filtering and faceting are a part of the search experience. People should be able to take the results that come back, especially if they're a lot, and then filter them or break them down in a way that makes them more useful. So the way that we present and filtering and faceting and having that functionality available is critical to the IA. Inline links. Some people don't see inline links as a part of information architecture, but they are. If you can provide easier ways for people to find what they're looking for, then do it. Inline links, not click here, make it an inline link so people can, the link is obvious, people can click it, they can go find what they're looking for, and everybody's good to go. So inline links are part of that. Content strategy. I know this is a separate discipline, but every time I look at content strategy, I see it as a part of IA. I see it as IA's cousin, if you will. And this is basically revolving around the efforts to manage and optimize the information presented on the site to ensure its value, consistency, and relevance. This is a huge undertaking that we need to make sure that we're paying strict attention to. And again, you have people who are content strategists by trade. That's what they focus on. That's all fine and dandy. But we need to make sure that we provide that information and that functionality on our teams. Somebody has to look at the content. Somebody has to make sure that deprecated content is accounted for. Then there's research impact. So that could be tree testing, card sorting. So these are 10 key IA factors. We want to make sure that we have these, that we're focusing on them. We have these on our radar. We're focusing on them, that everything is being taken care of properly. So tapping into, for the last few minutes here, IA in the connected world. This is the theme for this year's event. According to the folks that were on IA Day, in a world where we're connected yet distanced, how do we facilitate connectedness? Information architecture is at the core of this. Remember, the product of information architecture is findability. And I love what Peter Morville said in Ambient Findability. He said, where the internet meets ubiquitous computing, the histories of navigation, communication, commerce, and information seeking converge. So this is key. He also says, speaking of some goals, we want to find our way, we want to find products, we want to find answers, and we want to find ourselves. He goes on to say, once again, findability serves as a useful lens for seeing where we've been and what lies ahead. These are things that are at the core of why a connected world is important. And we have absolutely no shortage of connectivity options whatsoever. There's no shortage. You can connect to people across all these different venues However, I do encourage you, please do not leave off critical thinking. All information is not valuable. Misinformation abounds. So these things are critical. Make sure that you embrace critical thinking in the midst of it. So nomenclature, taxonomies, information sets, these things are at the key of what we do. These are the major aspects of IA. Let's make sure we embrace it today. Don't allow the backsliding, if you will, in UX concerning IA to overtake you. Rediscover it if you have to. Discover it if you don't know about it, because it's a beautiful thing and it's going to help take the discipline forward. The more we embrace IA, the more it takes us forward. Even this old classic illustrations, I know some of you are probably familiar with this. I never noticed the bottom right-hand portion. Information architecture, it connects people to the content they're looking for, but it also connects us to conversations and other people. So connectivity is dependent upon information architecture. So, folks, that is it. And I'm ready to take any questions. Before we get there, actually, you want to find me in my podcast. I'm on Twitter. LinkedIn is where most folks choose to chat with me. I have my UX Uncensored channel on YouTube. We have the UX Chit Chat Hour where we meet with people once a month to talk about UX. I'm on Medium. I'm everywhere. So anyway, that's it. I knew I had to wrap up running short.
No, you're good. Thank you, Darren. That was a great presentation. And yeah, we were trying to get our links ready for everyone. And yeah, we saw we were quite visible in the internet space. So some people were just wondering, like, we just want to clarify, and we can just like do a quick summarization of like why you think IA has degraded over time. If you were to do like a one-liner or two.
Sure. Just from all the people that I speak with, different places that I've worked, things that people, the knowledge and skill levels that people say that they have, areas where they say that they need to grow, evaluation of different education programs across the country, no matter what that education program is, there's a dearth of IA. The knowledge of it, the focus on it, understanding of it, including it in curriculums, it's pedagogically absent. You know, a lot of places, and that's a problem because that's at the core of what we do as stated. So if people are not learning it, they're certainly not going to, I mean, you're going to do some of it because it'll happen out of common sense, but the expertise and the fostering of that expertise is not where it should be. I'm laboring to change that. And I think we need to make sure that we do that across the board. Some universities do it, some programs do it, some don't. They just touch on it.
Yeah. Did we do it? Yes. Check mark. We're good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that input. I totally relate to that. Like I said, I'm someone not from this background. And so I had to actively take a course in it, or I had to actively join a club or a professional community to be like, okay, so how do you guys do this? Because no one is teaching me this. And I understand that this is right common sense. I came up to me at work and I don't know how to solve it. So thank you for that. Elizabeth commented, that's one of the reasons why I came to you, Mish. It was one of the few programs that actually offers information architecture. But thank you, Elizabeth. Jeff has a question. Do you think IA has perhaps shifted to other areas like knowledge management and digital creation? Good question, Jeff.
I'd say no. Knowledge management is it's like content strategy. It's an aspect of content strategy. It is, I see knowledge management was actually part of that's the way the program used to be structured at Kent State. It was information architecture and knowledge management. So you actually learned it all together. So I was already practicing when I went to Kent, but it did, because of the way they presented it, it caused me to sort of group them together, to not really view one apart from the other at all, and to make sure to have my eye on one while looking at the other. Information architecture was the key. It was the crux. And then knowledge management was this next phase that you would always engage in. So you can't do one without the other. And what was the second part again?
Digital creation.
Digital creation?
Curation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to expound on that, what's meant by that before I answer.
Yeah,
Go ahead and
at least here at UMich, like digital curation is now one of the tracks, at least in the MSI program. There is like a UX research and design track, and there's now a digital curation track. So, which focuses much more on the like taxonomy side of UX and understanding metadata and yeah, mostly curating like digital systems and yeah, from that frame.
Okay. I always understood that as part of IA. That's the way I've always understood it. There, where emphasis might be greater or less, depending upon the initiative, depending upon the project, but taxonomy is always a part. I have an illustration. Some of you may have seen it before. I took it out of this deck. I've delivered this talk before and it was a part of it. And taxonomy I have grouped under information architecture as a part of that discipline. So again, I mean, back in 2003, if you created a website, remember, it's about findability, and SEO was all the rage. And you had to make sure that all of your metadata was optimized so that you could optimize findability. So you couldn't roll out a website. Even back in my Team Detroit days, well, Global Team Blue now, but back in my Team Detroit days, we would constantly, on a monthly basis, we would study different artifacts and resources that people were downloading off the site, and metadata was a huge part of that. So if you didn't understand the metadata, you couldn't really participate in those conversations or optimize the user experience. So yeah, I always saw it as a part of IA.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just interesting because in like the UX courses, a lot of these approaches like taxonomy and learning metadata isn't covered really at all. So yeah, unless students take like these other courses that might be more in like the traditional library science considered courses, yeah, or now more like digital archives and digital curation. That taxonomy is not covered at all.
And it's funny you mentioned that because IA, or well, just UX in general, I got into UX through instructional design, and a lot of the things that we did in that discipline I found were applicable and that we were doing them over here on this side. A lot of things that we do in UX coming through IA, which was the predecessor discipline, really, when you think about it, was actually built on the back of library science. And that's where that connection is really strong. So we had to have those taxonomies in place. I mean, you go to a library, you're trying to find a book, and you start going out around the library, whether we realize it or not, looking for information sets, going through the little Dewey Decimal, the little card catalog system. That's what we were doing. We're doing the same exact thing. We're just doing it digitally today. So those aspects of the discipline are critical for us to always fall back on, and why I always tell people, don't ignore the initial parts of the discipline. Has UX evolved? Yes and no. We should be doing things that were done in the earlier days of the discipline are still valuable today. And the people who embrace those will be stronger in their function as UX professionals. You don't want people to drink the Kool-Aid of things that are happening today as if things that we did yesterday don't have value. They're extremely valuable. They're extremely powerful. And they allow you to be more definitive when you're interacting with clients and stakeholders as well, too, as opposed to some of these guessing games and what I personally refer to as glorified spitballing sessions that are passed off as something else. It's really critical and important.
Thank you, Darren. Let's see. I think we can answer like one more question. So, this is brought up another good question of like, how do you think methodology like lean, agile, waterfall, etc., have contributed to the integration of IA into UX practice?
For me, in my observation, it hasn't really changed. Whether we're the only difference to me, and I'll to answer the question, I'll focus on waterfall versus agile. When we worked in waterfall, you just did your work, right? To me, the only difference is what I've done to simplify doing work in Agile, because most of us are in Agile environments now. What I found is I just commit to work per sprint. That's the only change I made. Talk about simplifying it. So I commit, I'm going to do these 6 things during the sprint. I know I can accomplish these 6 things. If for whatever reason something comes up that we didn't see, then we may modify it. We may have to roll something over to the next sprint. We have to put something on the backlog. But basically, I'm still doing the same exact things that I did. I might do them faster. I might be given to more iteration, but it hasn't changed the work for me at all. And I try to convey that as much as I can, because a lot of people are confused, especially about doing UX in Agile. It's just, they just took the long-term goal and they just pared it down and chopped it up into little pieces. So you chop up your deliverable dates and your initiatives into pieces as well. And it's worked for me. And all I did.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that talk. Long live IA from World IA Day in 2022 at University of Michigan. I had a ball delivering that talk. Those of you unfamiliar with IA, we hope you learned a bit about information architecture and how important it is to user experiences. One cannot deliver a sound user experience without giving attention to information architecture and structuring things in a proper way. IA is at the center of every user experience. It is extremely important. Before we sign off today, we want to let people know we've got a little bit of a subscriber push going on. You are looking at the Kaizen UX channel on YouTube. Of course, the podcast is available anywhere that podcasts can be accessed. So, I mean, Spotify, Apple, there's just a lot of different places where you can hear the podcast. You can only see video on select places. And one of them is on Shopify. Hope I didn't see Spotify. Spotify. And then on YouTube. And as you can see, those of you that are seeing the video, we currently have 473 subscribers. We've got to push, trying to get to 500 subscribers on YouTube. So if the show benefits you, you enjoy listening to the show, you support the show, go out to YouTube. Please make sure that you subscribe. Today, we're trying to get to that 500 person goal, if you will. Because once we do that, there are certain things that we will have access to. We're currently being restricted from doing certain things on YouTube because we only have 473 subscribers. So if we could trouble you, if you wouldn't mind, and if you do think that this show is benefiting the UX community, please go out to YouTube, please visit the Kaizen UX channel, and please subscribe. Or just access one of the videos, one of the podcast sessions that are there, and you can click subscribe while you're viewing or listening to anything that's there that we've provided on YouTube. Thank you for all of you who have already supported. Thank you for those of you who will support. And we hope you enjoy the show. We hope you're benefiting from this. We hope you understand the importance of this content to those who are operating in the UX discipline today. But we're going to go ahead and sign off there. So folks, until next week, this is Darren Hood, the host of the World of UX, wishing everyone all the best. And until next time, happy UXing, everybody.